are you? Welcome to another Notsam review. Netflix is paying attention. They've witnessed streaming services like Shudder show up and grab the horror genre audience, and Netflix wants their fair share, so they are jumping in, eyeless, tongueless, and earless head first to get that audience, not only by dropping movie trilogies like Fear Street that we talked about on Sam Roberts Now, but they're also going in to Italian horror, something that hasn't really been mainstream popular in the United States for a very long time, and dropping this movie that I watched over the weekend, a classic horror story. A classic horror story is directed by Roberto DeFeo and Paolo Stripoli, and it has made me think. It's been on my mind ever since I watched it, and that's why I thought we should discuss. We'll do it spoiler-free for the first half of the video, and then the second half of the video, we'll do spoilers and talk about the ending and all that. As I said, it's an Italian horror movie. You can watch the trailer and see that they use English overdubbing. But to me, and there's some subtitles in there too. There's some parts of the dialogue that need clarification when they have, like, they show a sign or something like that that's written in Italian. That's a subtitle. But for the most part, it's overdubbed. And I actually think, like, it takes a second to get used to it. But it really, for me, was only a second. And I think it actually adds to the bizarre nature of this movie. This is a bizarre film. This is a violent film. When you hear the title, a classic horror story, obviously it's going to be self-reflective, right? Obviously it's going to be aware. I, in the beginning, started to feel like it was becoming a little bit derivative. But then once the movie kind of showed itself for what it was, the derivative nature of the first part actually made sense. I really like when a horror movie makes you feel uncomfortable in a fish out of water type way. I love in a movie when characters make decisions that are probably not great decisions, and they lead them to a place where they are utterly helpless. And that's what we're left with in this film. We've got 4 or 5 strangers that are carpooling together in an RV, and they really do make up your usual suspects. You got the dick that thinks he's the boss, the doofus, the over-sexualized blonde, the obvious final girl, and Franklin from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So they're carpooling together. The doofus has a drink or two before he gets behind the wheel. Take a wild guess who might be killed first in this movie. But he's behind the wheel. They're driving at night on a deserted road through a forest that they have never seen before with no cell phone service. There's a dead goat in the middle of the road. They try to avoid it. They do successfully avoid the dead goat, but they do not avoid the tree that is right in front of them. The car crashes into it. Everybody passes out. When they regain consciousness, somehow they are far deeper into the forest than they had any idea. The road is no longer anywhere in sight, and all they see is a singular wooden house. That's when they realize that they are on the property of a cult that has historically been cannibals that believe in human sacrifices, and hilarity ensues. Obviously, with this cast of characters, the movie resembles any slasher movie that involves a group of strangers running away from a killer in the woods. But once the car has crashed, it very quickly becomes Midsommar. And that's where I started to worry about the movie. With the visuals that we were being presented and the hypothetical motives of the people who might be killing them, it felt like Midsommar with Eli Roth level violence. And as someone who loves Midsommar, I didn't want to see a horror movie kind of cheaply take everything that they had done to try to pull off the same scares. It is interesting, however, that the Eli Roth comparisons entered my brain right away, because as quickly as this movie went from being like a slasher movie to a takeoff on Midsommar or The Wicker Man, just as quickly for Act 3, it starts to resemble Hostel more than any other movie I've seen. And I think that's where we're going to get into some spoilers. Okay, hopefully by now you've either seen the movie or you don't care about it being spoiled. Once the characters who we know are going to die anyway die, we find out that the Italian version of Franklin from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is actually the person that was behind these killings the whole time. This was not remotely a surprise to me. I don't know if this was a big twist for anybody else, but I saw this one coming a mile away. It's the only thing that made sense throughout the movie. So this is where this dude being a filmmaker pays off. And by the time the reveal happened, I expected that it must have something to do with this. We find out that this Franklin character has actually been filming this entire thing And that while, yes, all these characters are actually dead and all these things have actually happened, there is no cult, there is no legend, and this dude is just creating highly elaborate snuff films for the mafia. Yes, the mafia is in the business of creating snuff movies. Instead of just killing people for revenge, they are now killing people for entertainment. Because for God's sakes, it's 2021. Nothing is real. All of the quote unquote cult members are just people that the mafia has under their control that they made into actors. And we find all this out in a dinner scene. The dinner scene, I have a problem with. The dinner scene, the head of the mafia shows herself to be the head of the mafia. We find out that the police are in on this. So there is absolutely nowhere for our final girl to go. Plus, her hands have been nailed into the chair that she's sitting on. So where's she going to go anyway? My only problem with this dinner scene is the most fabulously shot cinematic scene in the entire movie, and it's also theoretically the only scene that the director is not actually shooting for his snuff movie. So why would the mafia have such a cinematic dinner if it's never even going to be part of the movie? We do get a very satisfying ending, a nice, good revenge horror movie ending when our final girl figures out what's going on. She hears the voice of a girl who's this 12-year-old girl that she thought had her tongue cut out by this cult, but in actuality works right along with the mafia. She's the sister of the director who's responsible for all of this. So our final girl shows up with a gun, which she found on the set, and shoots the kid dead. One of the most satisfying child deaths I've ever seen in a movie. It's rare, but it can happen. And then, of course, puts the gun in the mouth of the director who's responsible for all this and blows his brains out before she escapes onto a beach. She shows up onto a beach looking all ragged. Everybody is filming her with their phones. This is where you figure out what this movie is actually about. Nobody's checking on her. Nobody's asking if she's okay. Everybody's filming her with their phones. She gets into the water, and we assume everything's going to be okay. Unless she's just never going to come up from the water. I don't know. But either way, she's not getting killed in a snuff film by the mafia. However, if she does die in the water, then everybody filming her on their own phones are making their own snuff films. And like I said, that's what this movie's all about. The post-credits scene, you're watching people go on the dark web and watch this thing on Bloodflix, I believe, is the dark web version of Netflix that they created for snuff movies. And we see people giving it a thumbs down because, unfortunately, the girl didn't die. Again, a commentary on the bloodlust of all of us watching this movie at home. There were moments where I felt like this movie got a little bit derivative, but to me, that can be justified and explained, so that does not count as a flaw. There are definitely points in this movie where it gets a little convoluted and messy, and that's fine too. But this movie, for what it is, for its originality, even through the derivative nature of it, its originality, the twists and turns that it takes, the fact that Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 all seem like three separate movies that do end up, not seamlessly, but do end up interweaving into this really complicated, interesting story that make you think, makes me feel like I should recommend it to you. If you are a person who likes violent horror movies, if you are a person who likes bizarre, violent horror movies, then I think you will enjoy the process of watching a classic horror story. I think you will enjoy the journey that you go on through it, and I think you will enjoy thinking about this movie and talking about this movie after you see it. I know that I enjoyed thinking about it, and I'll tell you what, I enjoyed talking about it. If you enjoyed me talking about it, leave a comment below, subscribe to the channel, turn the bell on, and don't forget to hit like. It's just a thumbs up. Hit that like button. Not like the guy in the Bloodflix. He hit thumbs down. I don't like him. Thumbs up, okay? We'll see you for the next Notsam review.